Test, test, test. Test. Test, test, test. Test, test. Test. Test, test. Test, 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 test. Test, 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 test. test, 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 test.
Yes.
Oh, closing the doors. Let's think about that. Hello, welcome to Arts and Letters. I am Jenny Jaski, the Chief Curator here. Thank you all so much for coming. For anyone who's new to coming to Arts and Letters, we have exhibitions, which you saw in our galleries today, and we also do events. We have one upcoming for the Diane Simpson show with Josiah McElhenney, so look out for that. I think that's next weekend, and we have a concert later this month as well. We are a artist-led institution that's an honor society for artists, writers, composers, and architects. And as part of our members so generously giving to other artists, this is how we have this program. I'm going to pass this over to Noah, who's organized this event for us.
Thank you, Jenny. Hello and welcome. My name is Noah Wesley, and I am the assistant curator here at Arts and Letters. I am very fortunate to be one of the curators for Sam Contis's exhibition upstairs, and one of the editors of the Arts and Letters Readers, both of which I've done alongside Jenny Jaski. The Arts and Letters Readers, if you're not familiar, you will be by the end of today, are a series of interdisciplinary texts that we commission each season to accompany our gallery program and publish as very beautiful pocket-sized books that are available free to our visitors. Today, we are celebrating the publication of our most recent reader, Kathryn Scanlan's Your Time is Your Time, which I hope you have all gotten a copy of, and if you haven't, there are some right outside the door. Your Time is Your Time is a work of short fiction inspired by Sam Contis's work with teenage cross-country runners in rural Pennsylvania. Scanlan interviewed runners featured in Contis's photographs, drawing from these conversations to build her text. Like some of Scanlan's previous works, including her novels Ognine Fog and Kick the Latch, Your Time is Your Time constructs fiction from existing material. Over the last year, as part of this project, I have felt very lucky to spend time with both Sam's work, her photographs and films, and able to spend a lot of time with Kathryn's books, reading and rereading them. And through this parallel encounter, I discovered that Kathryn's writing is something like photography, or that Sam's film might follow the narrative arc of a short story. In other words, thinking of Kathryn and Sam's work alongside one another has helped me understand what photography and film might share with fiction, and how thinking with fiction might help us better understand what we mean when we say documentary. Today, it is my hope that you'll all have a similar encounter with these two artists' work. In their conversation, we will hear more about how both artists share a common approach, taking fragments from everyday life and transforming them into something strange and new. With that in mind, I'm going to pass things over to Sam and Kathryn, who are going to discuss their collaboration and the connections between their artistic practices. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. I think Jenny already said some of them, but if you haven't already, there are drinks in the library that you should feel free to grab. The talk should last about 45 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions, so you can think about those while the talk is happening. And afterwards, you're all invited to hang out, have another drink in our library, visit the exhibitions upstairs. Sam's show will be open until 6:30 today. For those of you that would like to see the film, if you haven't already, it begins every half hour on the hour, and the last screening will be at 6 o'clock. Okay, so I will hand things over to Sam and Kathryn. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you to everyone who's here. Especially thank you to Kathryn for being here and for being part of this journey that we've gone on in making the show, but for sort of saying yes to an invitation. We didn't know each other before, but I was a big fan of her work. And I had reached out to a mutual friend and I said, I really love Kathryn's work, and do you think she might be interested? I said yes, and she said, go for it. And that was Kate Wolf. And she said, I really hope she does, because I'm so excited to see the way you two sort of respond to each other's work. And so, it's been an incredible privilege and honor to have you think about this work with me. So thank you so much.
Likewise.
Thanks.
Thanks for the invitation.
And I just want to say thank you to everyone who's here, and especially to the people who are here who have participated in this work that I've made. Some of you have been part of this, some of the runners that I've been working with since 2018. And it's been an incredible journey with you all too, and it's meant so much to have you participate in this work and be a part of it for all of these years. And there are two runners here who are featured in the film, Amy and Paige, there in the center. Thank you so much for being here. We can all give them a round of applause. Thank you. It's really felt like a real gift to have you be part of this and make this work together. And Alex and Marianne, who are here as well, who have been part of making of the photographs, again, for a very long time, and were also interviewed and spoke to Kathryn about the making of this work and their experience as runners. And I'm really grateful to have you be a part of that. So Alex and Marianne, thank you so much. So maybe after acknowledging that, I work with people in the world, I thought of you immediately when Jenny and Noah sort of suggested that this might be an opportunity to accomplish something that they had been wanting to do for a long time, which was have a fiction writer, respond to the work, and so create something that was not necessarily commenting on or critique or essay form about the work. My name wouldn't necessarily even have to enter into it, that it would be something that could sit parallel to the work. And I thought of Kathryn because I had read her book, which you'll see flashing there on the screen. I had read her book, Kick the Latch, first, and then I discovered another book of hers, Og9 Fog, and then came to her short story collection, The Dominant Animal. And what made me think about her work, other than just immediately loving it, was the way she works. And in all of the work, she's working with very specific people. There's a real sort of sense of shaping the work, that it's fiction, but it is tied to specific people. So for example, in Kick the Latch, Sonia is the protagonist and is a real life person and in the world, and is a very compelling character. She's a self-described, I guess, race tracker, so a horse trainer at a racetrack. And the book is made up of these, I've heard them referred to as vignettes or chapters, and that's a question maybe for you, but it's based on real life interviews you did with her. And then in the same way, Og9 Fog is a found diary that you came across that was sold at a public auction, is that right? And it belonged to a stranger, so someone you didn't know, someone you never met, and someone who was living in a small town of Illinois. She was in her 80s, I think, when she was writing the.
She was 86 when she started it. It was
Okay.
a 5-year diary.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So from the late 60s through the early 70s.
68 to 72, yep.
Okay. So yeah. So I was struck by the way Kathryn works with real life people and makes something incredibly sort of strange and compelling. And it sort of situates in this sort of in-between place that I really related to, but I think is rare to find in fiction. It's something that doesn't sit easily in one category or another. I think in photography, for example, people are uncomfortable when you make something that doesn't sit easily in sort of photojournalism or documentary, or I don't know, I like to think that my work sort of straddles all of those things and sits uncomfortably in each of those things, I hope. And so yeah, so I thought of you as a writer, and I thought maybe to begin to get a sense of what you've done here, maybe you could start by reading from the reader. So if you haven't gotten a copy, they're available outside here and also upstairs. So this is our official publication launch.
Yeah, so I'll just read the first bit of this. Your time is your time. It's so simple to start. Get a pair of shoes and you're good. Obviously, there are people buying $300 racing shoes, but for the first few years I ran, I used the same cheap pair of spikes. It doesn't really matter. You can't cheat your way through. You have to run the race. My first season, it was very difficult. The fastest girl on the team, she was my first experience of a fast runner, and I said, I want to be like her. So I worked my butt off. I went from barely being able to finish a run that season to I was our alternate at States. I was really buying into running, and I was liking it a lot more, and I was so driven by the fact that I wanted to be the fastest. She's that fast. I want to be that fast. I want to be as good as she is. I want to beat all of these people. Growing up, whenever family life and school would get stressful, I would go on a run and try to sprint it all out. I still have that mentality whenever things get too hard or too complicated. Or if I just need some time to think, I'll run. That's what I use running for, and that's what I love about it. My first year, I was really anxious every time I would race. I'd have anxiety attacks during each race. Sometimes I didn't make it through. I remember thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to do 6-mile repeats at a 6-minute pace on a Saturday morning. That sounds impossible. You learn how to push against what your mind sets up. At that young age, you don't think you can do all these amazing things. We always used to say, what's the glaze looking like? At the end of a run, you'd wipe the bottom of your chin with your pointer finger, and if your finger looked like it had gone through a Krispy Kreme glazer because you are so sweaty, then you'd have really good glaze.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we can circle back around to the text, but I thought maybe in thinking about the work for this reader for this piece of fiction came from an invitation, but like much of your work, it starts from the everyday. It starts from real life, and in a way, like it seems like anyone could be a subject. And I think that's something I really am interested in too, that if you like attention and time, those are two things that are really important to me in my work. But I was sort of curious what draws you to your subjects and how you decide what's worthy of attention, or like how does an idea take hold in relation to potentially like seeing something or hearing something, and then it's sort of blossoming from there.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just sort of like a, it's a heat-seeking endeavor, like just whatever. There's like lots of things all the time that are interesting, and I do sort of think that, yeah, anyone could be a subject or anything could be a subject. I think that the world is just sort of overflowing with things, and it's just a matter of things that are really interesting, and I think it's just a matter of paying attention, which I feel like is something in your work too. Like there's it's the closeness of the looking. I feel like your attention, like what you put your attention on. Yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking in my little notes that I made, I was thinking about how there was like a quote that I came across. Someone was writing about your work and they called it self-effacing. And I feel like people have said that to me about my work as well. And it kind of surprised me. It kind of surprised me when it was said to me, because I don't think of it that way, but I understand what they meant, I guess. Just not this like, huge centering of the self in the work or whatever, or just maybe sort of being more interested in what's around you than, but I think that maybe in both of our work, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that, oh my gosh.
I mean, I can jump in that, like, I think it is self-effacing to some degree. Like, I sort of want to step out of it, and then yet I've had multiple people ask me, and I've even maybe come to see it that way a little bit, but I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, that the film, for example, could be seen as a self-portrait in a way. But I hadn't, like, I don't think of, I think when I'm thinking about making work, it's because I want to pay attention to something or someone that is not me, and that I am the sort of last person I'm thinking about, although it is very particular to my interest, or like I like what you said, the sort of like heat-seeking, that it is something that resonates like deeply with me. But then maybe it takes a while, and often like many years, for me to realize like where I am actually in it, even though I actually am often in it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think, maybe what I was trying to say is that the interest, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I got back from Germany last night, and my brain is really
it's now
not,
10 o'clock at night.
It's really not working well.
Yeah.
I keep losing my thoughts.
That's okay.
But I think that, okay, we're going to talk about something else. Oh, Lord.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, and maybe this is something like that relates to sort of seeing ourselves or not seeing ourselves in the work, or just thinking about spending time in a place or with a person or with this material that you're gathering. And because I think we're both doing that with like real life, this idea of like real life subjects. And so I was curious, like, how you think of your work in relation to that. I mean, I get asked, for example, about my work in relation to like the documentary. And I think in some ways, when people see me working, like in particular this work, I essentially like joined a cross-country team, and spent time with them every day over many years, or every cross-country season, which happened, every fall in Pennsylvania, spending time with a group of young women, and going to practice, going to meets. And so to someone passing by or sort of looking at what I'm doing from the outside, like, it does, seem like I'm approaching it in a very documentary way. And I'm always, then trying to push back against that in a lot of ways. And I guess I am always like, what does that mean? Like, what is the word like to sort of have a document and make something documentary? It feels really slippery, and it always feels like I'm sort of after more of a kind of fiction, because I'm never necessarily like trying to tell a story of like an individual like that they might tell of themselves, for example. Anyway, so I was curious if that's something that comes up in responses to your work, or like how you think about working with real life subjects and sort of thinking about these like documents. Or I know, like, for example, Kick the Latch, you were working from transcripts, and then you also had the material, for example, in Og9 Fog, like the journal. And so thinking about those materials and and those actual like sort of physical documents that you then had, a transcript or a diary.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like Kick the Latch, for example, like I could have written it as, sort of more of like a straightforward sort of like oral history. I love those kinds of texts. I love like Studs Terkel. And, I like reading oral histories a lot, but I think I was just really interested in how I could use that material to make a novel. Like from the beginning, it felt to me like this is a novel, and I'm just interested in, the novel, and in fiction. And so I think that and also like with this text that I wrote for you, like I think in my mind, fiction comes in, even if I'm using material that is coming from real life or, real people, the fiction comes in with the shaping and like the conceptualization of it. And like, Kick the Latch is organized into these, very sort of stylized vignettes, with titles. There's a number of changes, I've made throughout. And same with this text, it's like, it turns, it starts as this sort of oral, or like a conversation. And then it gets changed from that into this, very formal written text. And the runners in this particular piece, like, it's several different runners that are speaking, but the combination of them, it becomes this other thing. So it's less about these individual voices. And with Sonia too, I think like all of the decisions that were made in that novel, she kind of stops being Sonia the person and starts being more Sonia the character, with all of those changes. And I was thinking about that a lot when I just was upstairs seeing your show for the first time, like how that project is, so on the surface documentary, like you're saying, but the formal decisions that you've made and the way that you've presented it's just not documentary. It becomes like this completely other thing where your sensibility is there, and especially the film, like it's such an incredible, moving, really like transcendent kind of experience. And I guess, I wonder, like, how do you think would you call it narrative? Like for you, like, is it narrative that you feel like you apply or like use, these kind of like formal decisions and things? Would you call it something like narrative, or would you call it something else?
That's a good question, because I think I wasn't conceptualizing a narrative in the beginning, but like a narrative is there in the film, for example. Like I think I had just had the idea of like, what would it, like that it sort of came about as more of a formal exercise, like that I wanted to watch a race from start to finish. So the film, if you haven't seen it yet, there are 3 runners. Each run is on one screen, and it's a single take. So you see a 5-kilometer race from start to finish. Each young woman runs a 5-kilometer race, and there's no cuts. It's a single take, and you watch them. It's just from the point of view that you never get to see in a race. So that was really where the idea started, that like, what if, you're not watching them sort of speed by, for anybody who's out watching the marathon this morning. They come by in a blink of an eye. It's so fast. And you often are seeing that sort of profile view, or, running after someone or someone, but like, what if you saw someone and stayed with their face for the entirety of the race, that the camera never moves or is trying to sort of frame just their face, and the body is in a way removed from it, that all of the sort of movement and effort is you're seeing through the face. And but I had that idea that sort of like the structure of it was the formal quality of it, and then what if you weren't allowed, or in a way like the camera refused to look away from the face of this young woman for however long it took her to run the race. So that was the starting point. And then as I was filming it, and there were several races that were filmed, I started to realize that there was this like incredible narrative happening. And maybe that was something that sort of subconsciously I knew. I knew a race, sort of has a beginning and an end, but it just felt like watching the faces of these young women, there was so much more narrative there than I could have even hoped for. And the same with the portraits, that the sort of narrative, or like this was a question somebody asked me recently, like, do you consider them portraits? And I said, well, I don't know exactly. I think that's like an interesting question that maybe the work asks, like, is a religious icon, like, is that a portrait? Because I think of them almost as these like religious icons.
Yeah.
Is that, I don't know. And so I think, but the sort of narrative also comes in the shape or in the form, so that like as you, the pictures are pictures of these young runners as they are approaching or have just crossed the finish line of a race. So they're these sort of ecstatic portraits, if we want to use that word, of this moment where they are sort of outside of themselves, or at that moment where this sort of like exertion has taken over and you lose this sense of yourself, or you lose the sense that like other people are watching you, right? That you don't even have the ability to sort of take in the outside world, that you're in this internal sort of space or somewhere else entirely. But yeah, the heads slowly turn as you walk and sort of follow them along the walls. There's this like revolution that happens, and that was sort of like the narrative that I was interested in, both like taking those moments, but then like creating this, in a way, a narrative arc, but not in a, I guess, traditional sense of narrative, in a maybe more formal or structural way.
Can I ask you, like, with this, so you've been working with these same people for many years, right? Since 2018?
It started in 2018, and then they're members of a high school cross-country team. And so, some, new people join the team, people graduate, people quit, people get injured. Anyway, so people come and go. But yes, many of them for many years I've known for a long time now. So
when I was speaking to the runners on the phone for this piece, some of them mentioned how they would be running and all of a sudden it would be like, oh, there's Sam popping out of a bush. So I wanted to ask how you got the work that you wanted to get, like how much communication was there, or like were you asking them to do certain things? It sounds like a lot of it was just trying to catch them unawares. But
I mean, that's funny. It's always like then funny to hear the way that you are then seen by the other people. Luckily that's not captured on camera or film. Luckily for me, but yeah, I mean, I think they did get this sense that like I was just sort of in the background and would sort of forget that I was there oftentimes, but was always there, sort of just watching, and sometimes with my camera, and sometimes just sort of like getting into the rhythm of the day. And yeah, that it was something where, for example, I mean, this is the interesting thing, like that I was really like there are two things happening in the work upstairs. There is the fact that in the film, they are hyper aware of my presence, and it is in many ways like a performance for the camera that I ask them, the camera is in front of them the entire time, and I ask them to look into the camera as much as they could as they're running. Obviously, they're trying not to trip and fall, and we're going over through like uneven terrain and through like forested areas and where it's rocky and there's tree roots and stuff like that. But anyway, but I wanted them to be acknowledging the presence of the camera, the presence of the viewer, of like you sitting there watching it, of me there filming it. Even the middle runner, she breaks it for a second at the end and sort of like smiles at somebody off camera. And at first I was disappointed in that moment. I thought, is that gonna sort of ruin it? That's like breaking this wall. And then I thought, like, oh, it's actually so beautiful that she then like, you then think about like who else is there, who else is watching. That in many ways, like the film is about looking both like, and that gaze back and forth and being watched. But then conversely, like in the photographs, there's something about, I was sort of waiting for those. I was watching them, but I was waiting for that moment or looking for that moment where they lose all sort of sense of themselves or of being watched, which I think is so rare for any of us these days, that we're so attuned to sort of being looked at by cameras, surveillance, in many ways, but particularly for young women, who are teenagers, they're hyper aware of the way they're looked at or the way they're seen and the way they sort of, think about imaging of themselves. And so I could even see in the pictures I made over the course of a race, like when they got to that moment towards the end, like where they just couldn't, again, because of like sheer fact of like force of exertion, that they lost that ability to be aware of their surroundings or of me taking pictures, or they sort of like have a sense of themselves. That sort of like for this brief moment, like that's what I was looking for, and I could see their faces change and the sort of like way they, in some cases like felt like they left their bodies, and in some cases just felt like they were so deeply sort of internal, like within themselves, that they weren't thinking about the outside world too. So yeah, there's like there's both of those things at play, I think.
That's something that I feel like I saw that you said about Dorothea Lange too, like her ability to photograph people in a way that they've forgotten, or they've kind of forgotten that she's there. It's just something that occurred to me hearing you talk.
Yeah, I mean, in that work too, I mean, and this was something that I could do, and with the Dorothea Lange work too, like in both cases, and I think, again, it relates very much to the way you work, that I sort of have a tendency to build up, especially with photographs, like archives, or I really like to sort of have a lot of material. And sometimes I don't know what I'm going to do with that material, that I am just collecting the material because, again, this sort of like heats, I like, I'm going to use that, like this sort of like something that's either touched me or like an image that I have that I just can't shake in my mind, or something I've heard, or something that just keeps coming back to me. And so I don't necessarily know what I'm even looking for, but something that feels really compelling that I like need to repeatedly show up and sort of pay attention to. And sometimes, and I think, sometimes I think, oh, I'll do it for a few months or a year or a season or something like that. And then inevitably I find that the more time that passes, the more interesting things get and the more time I want to spend. And so the archive inevitably grows. And I worked on a project with Dorothea Lange's archive, where I let myself, in a way, sort of like live amongst sort of Dorothea Lange's pictures for several years, and then ended up like editing that work and shaping that work as if it was my own, that I created a sequence, an edit and a sequence of pictures that felt very much like related to the way I saw the world. And in some cases, people thought some of the pictures were mine. And so a similar thing started to happen with the pictures of the runners, in that I was there for many years and making pictures, and not really with a specific sense of what I was going to do with them in mind. A lot of the pictures, I started making pictures primarily because I was sort of also trying to figure out how to make the film. And so the pictures sort of happened in relation to thinking about the film. And over time, I have this incredible archive of pictures of this like portrait of these young women and of this time. And it wasn't until just in the last couple years that this sort of idea for the sequence, the work is called Phases, that this particular sequence, there's 24 photographs in it, sort of came to me. And I thought, oh my goodness, have I been spending like the last 7 years with this body of work? And it's just like, it sort of ended up like being whittled down and pared down into this like, this thing that I didn't really know I was after at the start, but sort of slowly revealed itself over time and spending time with this archive, that these were the things that kept sort of bubbling to the surface in a way. But I was sort of curious in the way you work too, like that I felt, in a way, like it felt like this work was very like sculpted, and I was curious, how, like if thinking about sculpture or sort of like pairing something, or starting with all this material, like a transcript or a journal, or, the interviews, the transcripts that you did with the runners, how you find the form, or how you like, do you have an idea in mind initially? Is there something that jumps out, and then, or like what sort of bubbles to the surface, and how does the shape unfold? Like, how do you find the shape of some of these things? Does it happen organically over time, or is there like a little strand of something, and then you like see it, and then you go out and and then you like look for it in the materials that you have? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think, because I think it's different for every project. Like Og9 Fog, it was just like years of me sort of reading through the diary, and anytime I came across a sentence, or part of a sentence that I just loved, I would just type it, type it into a Word document. So then I had this big Word document, which was still like much smaller, than the original diary. And then it was like a process of sort of isolating those on pages. I think I just wanted to give them space, I wanted to give them room, and kind of like a stage. And then, but I think that book, like it's like 10 years really that I was messing around with that. But I think that it finally came together to me as a book, like near the very end, when I found this like 5-season structure for it. And Kick the Latch, again, was like a long process of, kind of finding it, but starting from the beginning with like these small pieces, like these kind of story-sized vignettes, and then working those into, again, like another structure. I think that the form is really important, and I think that a lot of times I'll just be floundering around with something until I realize like the form or the structure that I want it to have, and then it makes sense to me, or then it comes easily, like more easily. I feel like what you were just saying about archives kind of made me want to ask you about like found. Maybe this is redundant to what you're already saying, but just like I just feel like I'm interested in your use of the found, like in like what you were saying about the Lang archives, I do get that feeling from that project, that like you were like treating this work as though it was, you know, this kind of found material that you could manipulate, but then also like in Deep Springs, the archival photographs that you were like putting alongside your work, and then also the Overpass series where you're like kind of documenting these what seemed to me like found, you know, they're like found sculptures in the landscape. I don't. It's not really like a specific question, but just wondered if you have anything to say about that.
There was something you just said where I was like, I'm going to bookmark that for like later, and I want to come back to it, and it's already gone. But it'll come back to me. Because I think, yeah, I think something about sort of maybe with the, I mean, I will say with the Lang work, it felt like seeing, like I was sort of, there was this sort of second seeing that was happening, that I was sort of making a body of work, seeing through Lang, sort of, but it felt very much like my way of seeing. So there were these like two ways of seeing. There was her seeing, she initially made the pictures, and then my way of seeing, that I was sort of like, they were sort of being filtered back through me. And
yeah, this
like,
feels very similar to how I feel about Og9 and Kick the Latch specifically. Yeah.
yeah. So I think when you were saying that, like I was thinking that must, you know, resonate somewhere for you. And but then that even started to happen with just this, you know, that happens, I think, inevitably over time, and maybe you feel that too. Like it made me feel good to know, like that with the diary, you know, that it was like 10 years of sort of sitting with something, and yeah, because I always think something, you know, it's not going to take that long, and
I
then
know,
it
me
ends,
too.
yeah.
I always do.
I always, oh, this will be a little project, a little side project, maybe even, and then many years later.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, all of your projects really, it seems like they're like they span multiple years, and so I feel like you could almost say like they're all about time, or they're all like these durational kind of, or like time is maybe the medium in some ways of like what you're doing. Does that seem right at all to you?
Yeah. But they never, you know, I never think like, you know, with the film, I thought this is going to be about time, because the length of the run will be represented in a actual, you know, you can measure the time.
Yeah.
And in that way, it's very clearly tied to time, that this 5 kilometers is measurement, it exists in time. You're sitting there, it's durational. But yeah, I always think when I'm starting something that it's, you know, it's never going to take as much time as it ends up taking. But then I'm really grateful for that time, and that if I had tried to do it any faster, it wouldn't have worked, and it wouldn't have, I wouldn't have ended up with what I have. But I think, but also part of that time allows me, like just in relation to thinking about the photographs upstairs, that I have this archive, and even as I was, you know, working to just get a sequence of 24, that I have hundreds of these pictures, and was slowly, you know, just trying to edit down to 24 of them. But it is this sort of portrait of time and like these women's lives, and the time that I was present, and then these also like fractions of a second, because sometimes they're, you know, moments apart too, that I am really interested in the way, and also to go back to like Deep Springs, the archival pictures. It's a project I made in the West, where there are archival pictures that were made 100 years ago, woven into pictures that I made over a course of 5 years. And the pictures from 100 years before, I started to pull from archives, from photographic albums and things that were made, that I felt like were made in a way that talked about seeing itself, that like talked about this like process of like understanding yourself and your place in the world, like through photography. And so those were the pictures that I sort of started to slowly hone in on. At first, I was just, you know, all the pictures were so beautiful. I was, drawn to them in many different ways, but then I realized that what I was particularly interested in with the pictures that I was making weren't that different than what like some of these pictures were about themselves, this sort of using photography as a way to like get closer to something, to situate yourself, to sort of perform an idea of yourself for the camera. And so again, like sitting and looking over time, I was able to realize those connections and to think across this sort of 100-year span or 150-year span, thinking about like the beginnings of photography until like the time that I was making the pictures. So thinking from like the mid 19th century to today. And even in the work here that like, yeah, so much of it is about time in the sense that like, I'm thinking again about the history of photography and some of the early daguerreotypes, early portraits, where maybe people didn't have a real sense of how they appeared in front of the camera, how they looked to others, or what they were sort of slightly naive to the way people might see them or how the camera might portray them. So I'm interested in that. But then also time, like you're seeing an accumulation of years, you're seeing the time of the sort of turn of the head, like that I'm sort of playing with time in different ways, the sort of like expansion of time and like contracting of time in a way that I think like I was really struck by time both like and thinking about the expansion and contracting of time in Kick the Latch, where it's three, like was it you or Sonia had said to you that like it's the like most exhilarating 3 minutes like of your life and like watching a horse race, and that's what like the book feels like. It has this incredible pace and there's a sense of time and this sort of swiftly moving time through the book that you just keep going at this sort of breakneck speed, but then also within that you're able to sort of slow down and you see a whole life. So it's simultaneously like moving in these two different ways, and then also with the different seasons of Og 9 Fog, that there's this portrait. That's like 5 years condensed into 5 seasons. But then also the daily, that it sort of functions as a calendar too, and these like really exquisite, very carefully crafted vignettes. I mean that was something I had asked earlier, like vignettes, chapters. Do you have something that you sort of a way you think about them, or pictures, photographs?
I think vignettes is good.
Yeah.
I think vignettes works. Definitely. I think that I'm always interested in how time can be manipulated in a piece of writing, and I feel like I'm always trying to do this simultaneous thing of like speed and slowness, because that's, to me, that's what life feels like. And trying to accomplish that with, compression, and like thinking about the speed at which someone can read something, but also hopefully like the drag that, certain things have when you read them, like where maybe you have to kind of go even, if it's short, even if it's short, like you kind of have to go back. I'm just, while you were talking about the Deep Springs, like archival photographs, I was just thinking about there's like the backside of one of them that is photographed. I think it's like grass growing in deepest mud or something. I just love that.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about, I was like, Kathryn, the greenest grass is in the deepest mud.
Greenest grass in the deepest mud.
Right. That sort of, it's the way somebody had labeled the back of a photograph, and they wrote greenest grass is in the deepest mud. That's another book forthcoming from Kathryn Scanlan, that like found text on the back of photographs or something, manipulated into something. Because it feels like extraordinary when you find something like that. And so you must feel that a lot, like in terms of like speaking with Sonia and these like the sort of sense of like voice that she was sort of giving to you. But then I was sort of curious about thinking about voice and the sort of voice of Sonia, or the voice of the woman who kept the diary, and the sort of like character of voice, and sort of thinking about that in relation to also fiction. I was we sort of touched on it a bit, but I was curious.
I mean,
as you're like crafting and like what I think I had a note that you were like interested in, I'll come to it, but like, the sort of like expanding or, like where you go with that, that sense of like the character and then what Sonia gives you or what the diary itself gives you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, with Sonia, I think it was like in creating that voice, it felt to me like a very like delicate balance of trying to be really faithful to this, kind of really incredible oral history that, had been given to me, told to me, and then, but also wanting to have not my voice, as like a balance of like my voice and her voice, but like shaping it in the way that I, wanted the story to be told. So it did feel like kind of a combination of our voices, but also trying to completely like disappear, myself from the text to like be invisible, but at the same time, it's like very much there. The diary, I feel like, is different because it was a written text, to begin with. Like Sonia, it was conversations, and also Sonia is a living person, and I could call her up and, ask her questions about things if there were more things that something that I wanted to know more about that she had said, or and then also just like sharing the drafts with her and getting her approval and stuff like that. But with the diary, it felt more like like an editing exercise, and so like the voice comes through with the selection, and the white space. I think like the white space in that book is doing a lot for the voice.
Yeah. No, I think the white space, the sort of space around is so important. And I was also thinking about in relation to pacing and the sort of, both there's this sort of like staccato that happens within the text and the sort of pacing or like rhythm, and even you're like very attuned to sound, I think, in the way language sounds, but then what the pacing and the sort of space around, and that's something that really resonated for me as I'm thinking about what happens in like a sort of sequence and what happens individually with each, like sort of slowing down and sort of getting sucked into that very specific sort of moment or slice. But then just before we sort of open up to questions, I was just going to remark on the pacing and the voice. For me, the way it functioned in the reader was really exciting to see the text, that it sort of became this like sort of long running text, and that it was sort of, there were these, I could sort of see them as individual voices, but it also became like chorus too, that it sort of felt both like highly individual, as like you could read it as one person, or it could be this chorus or trio or team, and the way it sort of moved between the individual and the like collective portrait, but then also the way, I thought it was really nice the way the designer pulled stills from the film, so that it just becomes this long running text. You'll see, if you haven't seen it already, that it's really beautiful, the way Kathryn's words sort of continue to run through the book, and then it breaks in, but it continues on because you have this almost like incredible sequence of film stills too. So rather than just taking one or two pictures, that there's again this like connective tissue of the images to the words, and that they sort of, it gives this steady pacing of the run to the way you encounter the words, which I really enjoyed. Maybe we should open it up to a few questions. And I have more questions if there aren't any immediate questions.
Hey, wonderful to hear both of you. One word I was sort of hoping I would hear from you guys, but I didn't, was edit, because you guys are editing so much stuff down and kind of distilling it into something. And the sort of question started when you were talking about self-effacing, because people think about creativity as being like expressing yourself, but I feel, which I think is a crazy way of looking at creativity. But So what I thought was interesting was I wanted to hear like what you guys think about that, about the process of editing and how much you identify with that in a creative way, but also how important you think it is to your process, and whether you think it is a creative act. I mean, I feel like Instagram and social media have sort of made the idea of self-expression and creativity a very dubious idea. But so I sort of feel like self-effacing and editing is sort of an undervalued and underexplored notion in culture now. So I just want to know what you guys thought of that.
Well, I guess I mean, for me, editing, like, it is absolutely a creative act. And in some cases, I find it more exciting and like more pleasurable than even the picture making, that after I've accumulated this archive, to be able to like have some space from it again, years later, and to sort of go back into the archive of even pictures that I've made and sort of have that distance, and then be able to sort of see it again, so that they become slightly distant to me, and I'm able to sort of enter into these pictures in a different way. And I find, editing, absolutely a sort of essential part of my practice, in all of the work, both in the way like it exists in book form and the way it exists on the wall and the relationships I'm able to create between pictures, but then even also just in the way I'm able to sort of take a picture out of context, or, like even the pictures upstairs, it's, even a step further of editing, because I'm also like removing a lot of like trimming the excess that I see in the pictures themselves, into individual pictures that I'm going in, and I'm often cropping quite closely onto like the thing that I'm interested in. So the edit, like for me, takes many, many forms, both like within a picture, within sort of a grouping of pictures, within a book or a larger work, that the shaping and finding the form as part of editing. It doesn't become the thing without that.
Yeah, I feel very similar. I feel like editing is at least as important as the writing to me. And I don't consider it like in any way less, somehow lesser, like not artistic, or, not creative or something. It's sort of like where the work comes from, I think, in the editing. That's always how I find it, really. And I think that it's really fun. I love editing anything, really. I mean, like you say, like grouping things and sort of like finding the shape through cutting. It's really a joyful thing, I think, to just cut things. Thanks.
Hi, Sam. I'm Juana here. I'm very curious about how you work with sound, and especially for this work, how you're presenting three different subjects. They seem to have individual lives. They seem to have been shot at different times of the day. So even though we're seeing them simultaneously, they are very much their own thing. But with sound, you bring them together. And also, even before you walk into the dark room, there is this sound that I'm imagining that is intentionally leaking into the galleries when we're looking at the photographs that are also outside. So I'm just curious to know how you're thinking about this sonic experience, what was important for you to achieve, especially bringing these together, and then how that is connected to the show as an installation at large.
This is the first time I've really worked in sound in this extended way with this film, and it was incredibly pleasurable part of the making of the work. And it was interesting too, because I started to think about it maybe it was a sort of another way of creating a narrative or creating a composition, was through the soundtrack too, was not just through the visual, but it ended up being a sort of collection of material too, that I was able in a way to make like a score. And it really, the sound is all generated by the runners themselves, their bodies. Even the part that sounds sort of slightly strange or droning or instrumental, that's actually a composition that came from the sound of the runners' own voices. And I worked with a composer to make that from the raw material of their voices. But yeah, it started to feel like something that had these different movements, and that in a way like felt symphonic or something too, that was another way of guiding you through this this journey, or like through this film with the runners. And I hadn't necessarily conceived of like the pictures sort of like having an acoustic element to them. I mean, I guess I was thinking about it because I know what it sounds like at the sort of end of a race. And so I was sort of listening for that in the sequencing of the pictures, that like there is a sound in my mind that, and even like a sweep or like a gesture of sound in this sort of like the swell that happens like at the end of the race, where there's this moment and across the 24 pictures as you're like approaching, and then like the sort of crescendo and decrescendo of like crossing the finish line, and then coming back into your body and catching your breath. And so I feel like I was maybe listening for that in the like as I was editing, and hoping that something might sort of speak to that visually. But then it was this, in a way, like, yeah, that they started, the photographs and the sort of sound of the film work together in ways that maybe I hadn't initially conceived of, but became very apparent, and also then became apparent too in the way that like you would experience the photographs in one way, not really knowing what the sound was if you encountered the photographs and you hear this breathing. But then you would also have a different experience of the photograph sort of coming out of the film too, that would be a different way of sort of creating a narrative of sorts around the different parts of the work. But yeah, the sound was very pleasurable, and I was really interested also in trying to get the runners in certain places to, it had sort of happened naturally. There was a sort of patterning, or again, I think about it a lot in your work, Kathryn, like this rhythm and like beats, and there are these sort of staccato moments or repetition of sounds, and like what could happen between the runners when they sort of fall into pace, whether it's through their footsteps and they start to hit a rhythm and it almost sounds like horses running or something too, or where they hit these sort of more playful rhythm too, where they sort of almost like sing or become this like vocal trio just in their breathing. But yeah.
One more question here. Sure. I wanted to know how you shot the runners, and how did you arrive at that technique?
Through a lot of experimentation, and that's part of why it took so long, was sort of figuring out how to actually to film it, and film it in a way that felt grounded, that wasn't like a drone flying or something. So we're on a moving vehicle, in a way, sort of like a lead car, if you think about the lead car in a marathon, but we are, as the girls can attest, we were very close to them, right in front. So it's a steady cam rig. Also one of the producers, two of the producers on the film are here. One was on location with us, and yeah, it was, as simple as I wanted the film to look and appear, it required a lot of people to sort of make that happen. And there was, somebody pulling focus in real time, which was an incredible challenge for any of you who know anything about filmmaking. Usually a filmmaker has their mark, and like you plan the distance and you know exactly how that person is going to cross, and you can sort of gauge the focus and the sort of leeway that you have. But this was just happening in real time, so we needed somebody who was incredibly adventurous and willing to do it, in real time, moving back and forth, being on a moving vehicle, and then having the runner in motion too. So it was definitely a challenge, but it was, yeah, it was a fun one. But again, like I needed the time to figure out, yeah, how to do it. And there was a lot of testing too, to figure out the right way to do it, to get like the look that I wanted to. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam and Kathryn. But for anyone that has more questions, feel free to hang around, grab a drink in the library. Sam and Kathryn are here to chat. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
2 more screenings, one at 5:30 you can still make, and then one at 6.
She said, oh yeah, there's a screening at 5:30 and then one at 6 if you want to stay and see the film.
I'm so sorry. Early on.
No, it's okay. It's like part of the settling in.
It's been a long time since that's happened to me. You know, when there's just nothing.
No, I know exactly. Thank you so much.
So scared.
No, I was totally there. I was like, yeah, this is what we, yeah, where you just like, where's my moderator? Hey, this is so wonderful.